Before we begin our normal course of business today, I am pleased to make two very important announcements for the California State University. The first is that the Presidential Selection Committee for California State University Channel Islands has successfully completed their work. Dr. Erica D. Beck, who currently serves as the Provost and Executive Vice President of Nevada State College, has been selected to serve as the next President of California State University Channel Islands. Second is the Presidential Selection Committee for California State University Chico has also successfully completed their work. Dr. Gail E. Hutchinson, who currently serves as Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs at California State University Channel Islands, has been selected to serve as the next President of California State University Chico. Congratulations to both, and my deepest appreciation to both President Rush, who has served as CSU Channel Islands since 2001, and to President Zing, who has served and dedicated more than a decade to CSU Chico. These appointments will be addressed in the Committee on University and Faculty Personnel, and updated materials for those items are now available. I will now take us to our normal agenda and ask Trustee Morales if he would convene the Committee on University and Faculty Personnel.
Thank you, Chair Monville. The Committee on University and Faculty Personnel is now called to order. Today, the committee has one consent item and two action items. The consent item approves the minutes from the meeting of January 2016. Unless there are any objections, the minutes are approved. Today, we have two speakers, Susan Green and Jennifer Egan. Ms. Green, could you take the microphone?
Good morning. My name is Susan Green, and I teach at Chico State. I'm here this morning to speak in opposition to the closed presidential search process and subsequent awarding of salaries to employees not vetted through the campus shared governance process, a process that is used to hire faculty, and the president is supposed to be the intellectual leader of the faculty on the campus. After the day of revisionist history I heard yesterday, in which faculty who sponsored a CSU-opposed oil severance tax for a dedicated CSU revenue stream were the ones who were not lobbying Sacramento hard enough with administrators for revenue for their own raises, it's clearly time for another history lesson today. The CSU board policy of conducting closed searches is a bad, increasingly popular trend among higher education administrators seeking to protect the status and power of similarly class-situated cronies across the country. By inference, if we only get the best candidates by having closed searches, universities that conduct open searches clearly don't want the best candidates. The University of Wyoming Board of Trustees rejected this disturbing national trend toward elitism and obfuscation, and they recommitted to an open search process for their new president last year. Clearly, they didn't want the best candidates like we did. Chancellor White, when you made your unannounced visit to Chico State on November 10th to direct the search for our new campus president, you stated your concern that donors to a candidate's current campus might stop giving if they discovered their campus leader was in our search pool. The message that Chico faculty, staff, and students took away was that you care more about an elite donor class to some mystery campus of some unknown candidate than you cared about those of us who work and study at Chico State every day. You further stated, we simply cannot put good people at risk. We cannot ruin 5 or 6 careers to get a president. Completely oblivious to the possibility that a bad presidential fit and administration for a campus can ruin the careers of hundreds of faculty, staff, and students. Chico State has had multitudinous conversations with you about our votes of no confidence in the presidency and cabinet leaders on our campus. We are told by you that discussing such issues openly would lead to us getting poorer candidates for president. Instead of using this open search process as an opportunity to begin to rebuild campus trust in the office of the presidency, you treated us like children, telling us that if we didn't shut up and sit down, we would make things worse for ourselves. I expect more from the chancellor of this system during difficult times in resolving campus climate issues. Today's announcement of Dr. Hutchison will hardly be an auspicious beginning for the leader of our campus. I don't want another CSU campus to have this experience. You're undermining the confidence of the faculty in campus administrations during a time of very great tension. This is the very time we need to be talking more and not less to our faculty colleagues. I urge you and the trustees to revisit and change the hiring and executive compensation processes immediately. Thank you.
Okay, so well, thank you very much for your remarks. Agenda item 1 will set compensation for the newly appointed president for California State University Channel Islands. Chancellor White will present the item.
Thank you, Trustee Morales. I'm very pleased with the appointment of Erica Beck as president of California State University Channel Islands. I first must thank Dick for his 15 years of service to Channel Islands. Following the efforts of J. Handel Evans, who served as a planning president, Dick's leadership as Channel Islands' first president has helped shape and transform the campus into an academic leader and destination campus in Ventura County. And in so doing, Dick has cemented his own legacy as a visionary. Thank you, Dick, and congratulations, and we'll get a chance to celebrate you before you retire this summer. Erica is currently serving as the Provost and Executive Vice President of Nevada State College in Henderson, Nevada. Before her tenure as Provost and EVP, Erica served as the Dean of Liberal Arts and Sciences, the Director of Liberal Arts and Sciences, a tenure-track Associate Professor and Assistant Professor of Psychology, and Chair of the Faculty Senate at NSC. Prior to her service in Nevada, she was a faculty fellow at the University of California, San Diego, and taught at Grossmont College in San Diego. In addition, Dr. Beck served as a research associate for the Salk Institute of Biological Studies. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of California, San Diego, a master's in psychology from San Diego State University, and a doctorate in experimental psych from the University of California, San Diego. I'm very confident that her leadership, her experience, and knowledge of public higher education will be a tremendous asset to the university as she assumes her position. Today, I am recommending an annual salary of $283,000. This salary complies with the board policy of November 2015 on setting presidential salaries. It is also less than that of the long-serving incumbent. In accordance with trustee policy, a monthly auto allowance of $1,000 is also provided. Erica will also receive an annual housing allowance of $60,000, which is the same amount that Dr. Rush received. Relocation benefits and standard employee benefits for CSU executive classification employees are provided. I want to express my sincere appreciation to the members of the search committee chaired by Trustee Norton, who worked diligently to identify a broad and diverse pool of applicants. I thank Trustees Abrego, Kimbell, Monville, and Taylor, who participated in the process, along with President Morishita and the faculty, staff, students, and community of Channel Islands, who worked diligently throughout the process and represented their constituents admirably. I ask for your support of the salary for Erica Beck, the next president of Cal State University, Channel Islands. Trustee Morales, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Chancellor. The compensation for the president of California State University Channel Island is an action item before the Committee on University and Faculty Personnel. Only committee members may vote on this item. May I have a motion?
I'll move it.
Okay, moved in second.
Second.
And is there discussion or questions?
Quick question,
Yes.
and I'm enthusiastic about Erica Beck joining Channel Islands. I think she'll be a terrific addition to carry on President Rush's legacy. On the housing allowance, you know, I'm a finance guy, so I'm looking at the number and I'm thinking, okay, 5 years, 10 years out, how much will we have spent? Would we be better off building a house and saving that money over the long term, or right? Because 60,000 over 10 years, 600 grand, and you can build a really nice home for a lot less than that. And goodness knows Channel Islands has some land. It's just something to think about, right? Long term, would we be better off looking at these instead of giving the allowance, building it, and then we can keep the home forever? So, didn't want to derail anything, but I would like to plant that bug in somebody's ear, whoever's in charge of such things.
Thank you for your suggestion.
So
Mr. Taylor.
planted.
Other comments? No questions? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item 2 was a compensation for the newly appointed president of California State University, Chico. Chancellor White will make that presentation.
Thank you, Trustee Morales. I'm very pleased with the appointment of Gail Hutchinson as president of California State University, Chico. I want to thank Paul for his 23 years of service to the CSU, including the past 12 years as president of Chico. Through Paul's legacy of leadership, Chico State is positioned as a leader for community engagement, environmental sustainability, and academic excellence. Paul will have a chance to celebrate you later before your retirement in this summer, but we want to thank you again today. Gail is currently serving as Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs at Channel Islands, and prior to this position, she spent nearly 20 years in various instructional and leadership roles at Chico State. She served as Dean of the College of Behavioral and Social Sciences, Chairperson of the Department of Kinesiology, Academic Senate Chair, Statewide Senator, and was a member of the President's Diversity Council. Before that time, she was a member of the Chico State faculty, teaching kinesiology with a specialty in teacher preparation. Prior to her service in the CSU, she served as the principal investigator and co-director of the Northern California Physical Education Health Subject Matter Project, the project director for the Pacific Wellness Center, and developed curriculum and taught physical education in elementary school. She holds a bachelor's degree in physical education, teacher education from the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, a master's from Teachers College, Columbia University in teaching analysis and curriculum development, and a doctorate of education from the University of Massachusetts Amherst in teacher education staff development. I'm very confident that her leadership, experience, and knowledge of public higher education will be a tremendous asset to the university as she assumes her position. Today, I am recommending an annual salary of $293,643. This salary complies with board policy of November 2015 on setting presidential salaries. It is equivalent to the incumbent salary. In accordance with trustee policy, a monthly auto allowance of $1,000 is also provided. Dr. Hutchinson will receive an annual housing allowance of $50,000, which is the same amount that Dr. Zing received. Relocation benefits and standard employee benefits for CSU executive classification employees are provided. I want to express my appreciation to the members of the search committee that was chaired by Trustee Fagan, who worked diligently to identify a broad and diverse pool of applicants. I thank also Trustees Day, Monville, Stepanek, and Maggie White, who participated in the process, along with President Castro, and to the faculty, staff, students who were elected from the Chico State campus to represent those constituents, as well as the community of Chico State, who worked diligently through the process and represented their constituents admirably. I ask for your support of the salary for Dr. Gail Hutchinson, the next president of California State University, Chico. Trustee Morales, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Chancellor. So is there a motion for this compensation? It's an action item?
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Chair Monville, that concludes the meeting of the Committee on University and Faculty Personnel.
Thank you, Trustee Morales. Trustee Fagan, would you please convene the Committee on Governmental Relations?
Okay, the vice chair says I can finally speak. So, well, that's true. It's all in the script, so I can't go wrong. Thank you, Trustee Chair Monville. I'd like to call the Committee on Governmental Relations to order. On today's agenda, we have one consent item and one informational item. The consent item is the approval of the January 2016 meeting minutes. If there are no changes or objections, anybody, the minutes are approved as submitted. The next item is an informational item, our first legislative update for the 2016 legislative year. Vice Chancellor Garrett Ashley, please introduce the item.
Thank you, Trustee Fagan. I would first like to congratulate Trustees Abrego, Day, and Taylor on their confirmations to the CSU Board of Trustees. Late last month, their nomination to the board was confirmed by a full vote of the state Senate. Our division enjoyed working with all of you during the process, and I look forward to working with each of you over the coming months and years. Turning to the other work of the legislature, they reconvened on January 4 to continue work on legislation carried over from 2015 and to introduce new legislative proposals for 2016. The first major legislative deadline, the deadline to introduce new bills, was February 19th. As newly introduced legislation cannot be acted upon until after the bill has been in print for 30 days, policy committees are just beginning their work to consider introduced measures. The overwhelming majority of bills are not eligible to be heard in committee until the week of March 17, which also happens to be the same week as the legislature's spring recess. This means that the legislature will essentially only have 4 weeks to consider more than 1,000 measures before the next significant legislative deadline on April 22nd. This is a very short time frame, and there will be a lot of policy movement during that time. Interim Director of Advocacy and State Relations, Nicole Munoz-Murillo, will address legislation that continues from the last legislative year, as well as an overview of bill trends this year that relate to the CSU and higher education. Finally, she will also touch on our budget advocacy efforts over the next few months. With that, Nicole.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Ashley. As this is the second year of a 2-year session, the legislature has been busy since reconvening in January. Besides beginning to introduce new legislation, the legislature also considered 2-year bills that had not previously passed out of their House of Origin. For the CSU, there are very few 2-year bills that we have been tracking that remain active. However, there is one continuing measure that would directly impact the CSU that will likely be part of legislative discussions in the coming months. That bill is SB 15 by Senator Marty Block and championed by President Pro Tem Kevin De Leon. Among other provisions, SB 15 would establish graduation incentive grants for CSU students. These grants would increase in value as students complete 30 semester units in a college year, thus incentivizing students to complete a degree in 4 years. The CSU has a support position on this measure, and we look forward to further discussions on this bill. As far as new measures are concerned, there are a lot. In total, 2,086 bills were introduced since the beginning of the year. Roughly half of these measures were introduced the last 2 days before the bill introduction deadline on February 19th. We have identified about 300 measures that need further review. Our office is working diligently with our colleagues in the Chancellor's office to assess the potential impacts of these bills on the CSU and our students, faculty, and staff. While we thoroughly review these bills and we will report on them in detail at your next meeting, I can update you on the trends that we are seeing as they relate to higher education in the CSU. Affordability, access, student safety, higher education coordination, employee relations, and time to degree are all trending topics. Let's start with college affordability, an issue that the legislature generally focuses much of its attention. In the past, we have seen many bills that have been introduced to limit increases in student tuition fees. While there are several bills on this topic, including one bill that would require a 2/3 affirmative vote of the student body to implement a student success fee, the legislature is also
Nicole,
yes.
Nicole, I hate to interrupt, but could you bring the mic a little closer to your
Sure.
mouth and
Lean forward a little bit? Sure.
We definitely want to hear all these words perfectly.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Okay. While there are, I'll start back at that sentence. While there are several bills on this topic, and I'm talking about affordability, including one bill that would require a 2/3 affirmative vote of the student body to implement a student success fee, the legislature is also expanding its focus to include college costs beyond tuition and fees. There are multiple bills dealing with textbook costs, food insecurity on college campuses, and even making public transportation less costly for college students. Along with these bills, there are many measures that aim to expand Cal grants, as well as to create new or expand existing state-mandated tuition waiver programs. While the CSU has not weighed in on the policy of state-mandated waiver programs, such as those created to benefit the dependents of deceased law enforcement or fire suppression personnel, or dependents of disabled veterans, we have and will continue to make the legislature aware of the cumulative fiscal impact of waiver programs, as the state does not currently backfill for any of the foregone revenue. Access will continue to be another important legislative issue. While access is generally a large part of the budget discussion, non-resident enrollment continues to be a significant issue for the legislature. Similarly, many members seek to increase access to public education by decreasing time to degree. There are multiple legislative proposals that would seek to implement promise programs or incentivize timely graduation, thus creating additional access for California residents. It should be noted that one of these bills is being authored by former trustee and current Senator Steve Glazer. As the CSU shares the same goals of these bills, namely to reduce time to degree and barriers to graduation and providing necessary student support, we are appreciative of the focused attention on these matters. Similarly, we also know that many of these shared goals require resources, which is why we are implementing a robust advocacy effort to increase state funding to the CSU. I will provide additional details about our budget advocacy efforts later in this report. Another topic that has received much attention in recent years is student safety. There are a handful of bills relative to preventing and responding to sexual violence on campuses. Several measures seek to improve Clery Act guidance and employee training in this area. I should also mention that there are a number of bills that deal with higher education employment. For these bills in particular, we will look closely at the impacts on our system, faculty, and staff. Switching gears a bit, since the closing of the California Post-Secondary Education Commission, or CPEC, there have been several attempts to establish a higher education coordinating body, and this year is no exception. While most of these proposals lack specifics, this will be an area that the legislature will engage in a robust conversation. Finally, there are many spot bills or placeholder bills that have been introduced that reference higher education, the master plan, or the CSU. As these measures do not currently include any content, we will closely monitor them to see if they are amended with substance. With that said, among the more than 2,000 introduced bills, there are two that are particularly important to the CSU as they are your sponsored bills. The first bill is Senate Bill 1412 by Senator Marty Block. Over a 4-year phase-in period, the bill will allow the CSU to invest in mutual funds and real estate investment trusts with no more than 30% of funds invested in the new investment options. The intent is to boost CSU's annual return on investment with the earnings, providing funding for CSU deferred maintenance and infrastructure needs. The other bill is Assembly Bill 2215 by Assembly members Jose Medina and Catherine Baker. This bill will make a technical change to government code regarding how the State Controller's Office distributes state lottery funds to the CSU. Finally, I would like to update you on our budget advocacy efforts in the coming months. During the fall, our staff met with 24 legislators and legislative staff to discuss last year's Stand With CSU advocacy campaign in order to improve our efforts in the coming year. These decision makers widely agreed that the CSU should continue to replicate many of the successful strategies employed in 2015, including delivering a clear message about budget needs, remaining transparent and accountable, executing regular state capital events, utilizing social media and localizing budget messages whenever possible, and continuing strong advocacy partnerships with internal stakeholder groups. Given this feedback, we will be employing many of the same successful strategies as last year. Our first budget advocacy effort is to report back to the legislature on how we are utilizing the new funds that the state provided. To accomplish this, we are partnering with the academic, Senate, CSU EU, and CSSA, and hopefully more internal stakeholder groups to meet with legislative offices and let them know that we are delivering on the commitments that we made about how we would use the new funds, growing enrollment, addressing infrastructure needs, and investing in student success and completion. Our next significant budget advocacy event will take place at the end of the month and is our joint advocacy day with CSSA. On that day, campus teams, including many campus presidents and students, will gather in Sacramento to meet with their local legislative delegations. Our hope is that students will be able to tell their CSU story and show how the state's investment is making a difference in their lives. These traditional advocacy events will be bolstered by our ongoing social media advocacy efforts. We have launched a #StandWithCSU Twitter account to engage and interact with members of the legislature about budget issues. As the budget subcommittees have just begun their work, our office will continue to work with Assistant Vice Chancellor Ryan Storm and the Budget Office to coordinate our efforts and advocate for additional investment in the CSU, and we will keep you apprised of our efforts. This concludes the legislative update, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Great. Nicole, thank you very much. Before we finish the report of this committee, we have a couple other things that we want to talk about a little bit. Just in reference to Nicole's description of the of the bills, including our own former trustee, Senator Steve Glazer, the emphasis for 4-year graduation rates is starting to be a concern, clearly a concern not only of the legislature, but also the governor's office. And there's so many benefits that come with a 4-year time to graduation that it is important. Again, I want to, a caveat on all this is what we've talked about before is when we talk about 4-year graduation rates, because the federal government, we're talking from the day you start till the day you graduate. And we all know that there's numerous people who may spend 4 years in total enrollment, but take 2 years off or go work or something, and yet they're not counted for 4 years. They're counted 6 years if it's 2 years. So hopefully we can come up with our own way of addressing that and explain how well we're doing vis-a-vis real time of enrollment. But all that be said, there is this focus, and a growing focus on 4-year graduation rates. I'm happy to say that the vice chair of our committee, Kelsey Brewer there, is graduating in May from Cal State Fullerton. Congratulations. And she's doing it in 4 years. So,
completion of her final
so Kelsey, can you tell us a little bit about your views on the benefits of 4-year graduation rates?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Trustee Fagan. As the Chancellor mentioned, I do still have to pass 2 of my classes, so fingers crossed on that one. I think all of you have heard me say multiple times at this board that I am a firm believer that anyone who wants to graduate in 4 years and is willing to take the course load and pass the necessary classes should have the support of this board and our system to do so. I was able to graduate in 4 years, and I was very lucky, and it came from a combination of coming in with some credits from AP classes and being able to get on priority registration lists early on, and also just having the support of the correct advising to take the right classes at the right time. And I definitely agree, Trustee Fagan, that there's a lot of benefits to 4-year graduation rates. I think it opens up more seats, as I've heard multiple members of this board talk about. It allows me to hopefully enter the workforce a little bit earlier and start paying back some of my student loans. And there's safe costs to the system in the state. And I think that that's not something that we can understate. But I also want to acknowledge that my reality is not universal. And that for some people, a 4-year graduation rate simply isn't possible. But to Nicole's point about this being a priority for the legislature, I actually think it's great because I know it's a priority for this board. And any time that we can be on the same page as the legislature, I think only good things can come from that. And I think in a lot of ways, it's an educational opportunity for us to talk about some of the nuances that come with graduation rates, like Trustee Fagan mentioned about reporting. I think that that's a nuance that we have to explain and make sure that everybody understands. I think we've always talked about at this board the nuances of the populations we serve. You know, low income, first generation, people who work 20 plus hours a week. And then I think we also need to have the conversation about any type of legislation that promotes 4-year is good, but we also need to make sure that it doesn't negatively impact those who are incapable of graduating in 4 years and doesn't create like a second tier of students. But I also am really excited that we're having the conversations about 4-year graduation rates because there's a lot of benefits to the system in the state, but it also focuses our attention to the role of the state of California in promoting public higher education and the success of students. I think it brings up a lot of questions, like, do we have the facilities and infrastructure to support 4-year graduation rates? Do we have the financial aid necessary to make sure that students are being supported in the way that they go about financial aid? I know that was a huge component in why I was able to get out in 4 years is because I didn't have to work more than 20 hours, where I sit next to students that work 2 jobs. That's a huge part of this. Do we have the resources to hire and retain a diverse faculty to support student success? Do we have the staff to do advising and other student success things? And so I think the questions that we have for the state of California are just as important as the questions that they have for us. And we have to be not only a full partner, with the state, but they need to be a full partner with us. And that comes with not only legislation that promotes four-year graduation rates, but with the resources to make it a reality for as many students as we can. And so I'm definitely a huge supporter of it. I think that the more students that we can graduate with a quality education in 4 years should be a priority of this board. And I think that the graduation initiatives and even Chancellor White's comments during the State of the CSU have shown the state of California that it's a priority for us. And so I think moving forward, it's just about engaging in the details and the nuances to make sure that this can help as many students as possible.
Wow. So I don't know what your major
Yeah.
is, but if it's rhetoric, I certainly understand. So that was very eloquent, and thank you. One thing I want to add to that is another benefit of the four-year time to graduation, obviously, is we're unable to have all the otherwise qualified students enter the system because we don't have room. So the sooner we get people in and out with a quality, good, excellent CSU education, the sooner we're able to bring in more people who otherwise are outside our gates. And that's a good thing. Hopefully, we're going to be able to end up supporting Senator Glazer's bill along with SB 15. I've been asked, how do we decide what our position is on legislation? And it's at the moment kind of a work in progress. One of the issues that I think has been a question was the involvement of the trustees ourselves in ensuring that we have a say in what the administration does. And so at the moment, as you heard from Nicole, we don't have positions on much of anything because it's too early. And so the work in progress at the moment is that within the next week or two or three, as Garrett and Nicole's operation go more into these bills, that we'll have conversations, Kelsey and I, with them, and kind of seeing what they think, and maybe seeing if there's any real issues there. But I would suggest that we may want to formalize these procedures to ensure the trustees have a very distinct voice in policy about how we go about taking positions on behalf of the trustees and behalf of CSU. So in talking with our esteemed chief counsel, I'm informed that the best way to do that is to put it on the May budget, May agenda as a proposal, and figure out some more specific ways that we can ensure we're all involved in it. But at the same time, very important, we don't get in the way of their very good work because things change a lot in Sacramento from day to day, and we don't want to get in the way. We just want to make sure that, we're still the trustees and we have those policies, responsibilities. So I think we'll go to that direction. One final thing in this very long committee report. If you notice on the four-year graduation issues, a big element is questions about bottleneck courses and how do we provide rewards to people who actually can and want to spend 4 years and graduate, and what if they can't because they can't get the course? And so a number of campuses, San Bernardino and Pomona, and I think Fullerton and others I'm sure I'm leaving out, all provide promises that if you do the right things and have the right grade average and all those things, and you still need a course because you can't get it in the 4 years, that then you can get it for free. I don't think, I know at San Bernardino that has been operating, but nobody has actually asked for a free course because they've been fairly successful in that direction, but we need to go in that direction more. So it brings up the question of bottlenecks. And so Executive Vice Chancellor Blanchard has kindly agreed to, at the May meeting, give us a new report about where we are on reducing bottlenecks. Again, a very complex question, and definitions of bottlenecks are tough to do, but Dr. Blanchard is ready to show us where we are, how we've reduced the number over the last few years since we got the initial report on the numbers. And Dr. Blanchard, do you want to chime in with anything?
Certainly I will. Thank you, Trustee Fagan. Streamlining students' pathways to graduation is something that the CSU obviously is taking very seriously, and with the benefit of the presidents along with their administrative teams and faculty and staff, very committed to making it happen. Better understanding and addressing bottlenecks is but one of the many factors that are at play in ensuring that we can get students to degrees faster. And so we certainly are going to take a critical look at where we are with the bottlenecks. And I would like to also perhaps present other factors that we have to have into consideration as we're looking at trying to get students to four-year degrees. I think Kelsey did a very fine job in explaining a number of different factors, and it's not in the spirit of providing some type of excuse, but it's more in terms of trying to better understand what are those barriers that are at play, and also focusing more on the profile of a student who is able to complete within a four-year period, and not on an anecdotal basis, but evidence-based, that we can provide to you, and hopefully we'll have all that data ready for the May meeting. If not, we may have to make it part one and part two. But I really think that it's imperative for us to better understand not only the profile, but the conditions upon which really have to be at play if we are to expect more of our students to complete within a four-year period of time. And that's notwithstanding, as you can imagine, increases in FTE allocations, especially if we're expecting more students to complete 15 hours of coursework per semester, then it stands to reason that we'll definitely need the resources, not only in terms of academic support, but also in terms of additional faculty to help us to deliver on that.
Wonderful. Thank you. We look forward to seeing that. So, questions, comments? Yes.
I was looking back over the recommendations of the financial sustainability report, and I noticed that one of them is to be sure that we always consider, quote, unintended consequences of measures that may steer the CSU from its core mission. And I bring that up because I know there has been some discussion that focusing too intently on a number like 4 years or 6 years could have unintended consequences. And I think we should, and I am sure that, in consideration of potential legislation that could impact that, we're going to be thinking through that sort of thing, because I think Kelsey could not have said it better. I'm pretty sure we all agree to that, the goal of the CSU, of course, is to get as many students to a valuable degree as quickly as they are able to get to the degree without anything we are doing standing in their way or creating impediments to the extent we can influence and affect that. But those kinds of things, and they're also important, advising, a good remediation program. The list goes on and on. We hear about these efforts to solve these problems at every single meeting. They require resources. So it is a partnership. And if anybody is suggesting in the legislature that, let's just incentivize these students to get through faster, it doesn't, to me, take into account that that would be the natural incentive of any student to try to get through as fast as they can. They don't want their life or us to get in their way. So we can't control all the things that go on in their lives, but we certainly can help with the things that we might, inadvertently put in their way. We have to understand that. So these kinds of bills, I understand, having a focus helps us to think about all the things that stand in the way of 4- and 6-year graduation rates. But the numbers themselves, I worry that if we spend too much time focusing on them, there could be some potential unintended consequences in terms of who we are serving. So.
Yeah, just a few comments. First, as it relates to the four-year graduation. I just had a few comments, but I can't put it any more eloquently than what Trustee Brewer said. So congratulations on your degree. And again, I'm not sure what your degree is in yet, but I know I got the invitation to your graduation. Hopefully I can make it. Very, very impressive, and thank you for your service. As it relates to Senator Glazer, I have not seen his proposal, so I chatted briefly with Nicole last night. I'm anxious to see what that says. I know he comes from a place of passion and commitment to higher education, so look forward to hopefully supporting it as well. But I also want to make sure that we work closely with him and his office to ensure that the details don't create more problems than they might solve, much as Vice Chairwoman Eisen just talked about too. And then just lastly, Chair Fagan, as you discussed on the process, look forward to hearing your ideas on how we can do that. I mean, obviously, I think ultimately the board is in control of the legislative policy and staff is there to implement the board's directions. But as you said, I knowing Sacramento quite well, staff are expected to be very, very nimble, minute by minute in some cases. So we want to make sure that what we structure is reflective of the laws on open meetings, but also gives them the flexibility to be responsive. I think it's going to really depend, based on how we work with committees, it's going to really depend on you as chair and Kelsey as vice chair to really understand the board's philosophy and thoughts at a very high level, so that you've got our trust and we've got your trust, so that you can give direction to Garrett and Nicole as things change. But I do agree with your principle. Of course, it's the board's number one objective is to set policy. We do that through a budget, but we also do it through our legislative program. I think that's very important.
I just wanted to offer a perspective. One, I think it's a very good thing that this board wants to engage and make the role of the trustee a meaningful one. I also want to say that I have been around in times where positions that the trustees took on legislation became a litmus test in confirmation. So as we go down this road of taking positions on legislation, I would just want to make sure that we are thoughtful about the long-term consequences because of that experience of positions of the Board of Trustees becoming a litmus test in confirmation, and wonderful public servants being taken out because of the positions on legislation, and there were some protections put in place so that the board could weigh in on legislation, but also not be judged in that fashion when coming before confirmation committees. So I would just encourage us to be to take a look at that as we head down this road.
Thank you, Chair Fagan. First off, all of your comments I agree with, and I'd like to second all the various points you made and echo admiration for Trustee Brewer's well-stated summary of the conundrum with trying to drive graduation rates in the reality given the complexity of our students. I did read about Senator Glazer's bill in the Daily Clips and printed it out. If anybody wants a copy, I have one right here. And I'm very excited about the structure of this idea. When I was CFO of the University of California system, I started modeling something very similar to this, although it included small annual increases in tuition, but a very similar concept. And I really thought it was going to work, and then we got a $600 million budget cut, and I had to put it on the back burner as we dealt with that emergency. But conceptually, I'm very intrigued with where Senator Glazer is headed, and I think this is well worth our consideration, and obviously look forward to the analysis from Dr. Blanchard and from CFO Relier on the various factors we have to consider. But I'm intrigued by this particular approach and look forward to learning more.
Trustee Taylor, just to follow up, were you able to do, at least at some level, with your consideration of the concept at UC, some sort of modeling as it related to what you thought it would do with the student? I'm just curious if there's a mechanism there that we should be looking at. That's what sparked my interest.
Well, the mechanism I don't know where I started it. I was going back to my days as a junior banker building a model in Excel and having a lot of fun doing it, working with my staff. But that was probably now 2011, 12. As you know, we had, in response to the first budget cut, jacked up tuition rather seriously and created quite the firestorm. And we were trying to think of a way to address that. Again, then we got kind of hammered with the second one. But happy to chat through modeling options with people because that's really interesting.
You had some sense of, what kind of result you get out of the student population, right? With cause and effect, so to speak.
It's a tough thing to know for sure. I do know, for example, at UC, the first time we increased tuition dramatically, very worried about what that would do to student demand for the university because it was a huge tuition increase. We saw student demand go through the roof. I mean, number of applications soared, even though tuition had gone up dramatically because the privates went up just as much. And to a middle-class family, public universities are still a great deal. So, yeah, the traditional assumptions kind of went by the wayside.
Anybody else? Just to address a little bit Trustee Eisen's discussion about resources. That's all, money. It's always at the heart of everything. In order to accomplish our real goal, which is excellent education for as many people as possible in the state of California. So that's obviously the goal. But one little specific regarding four-year graduation rates was a conversation I had with President Morales at San Bernardino. And they've had a specific program for 8 or 9 years of incentives to people who would want to get out in 4 years. And it includes specific advising, both by a single professional advisor hired for the purpose, along with student peer advising. And then after 4 years, if you've done everything right, that's an example of being able to get a free class if you need it, that you couldn't get it before. The problem is, it started out great with graduation rates at 33%, something like that, when it was a relatively small cohort of 40, 50 students. But as that number increased, the difficulty of advising all those people with one person, the difficulty increased just the same. So the success rates started to go down as the number of participants went up. And that's a real life example of what happens when you try in the best efforts to reach a very beneficial goal, but you don't have the resources to do it. So I think we have to keep that in mind, that once again, funds are always at the heart of everything. Any other comments, questions? Finally, I think, Chair Monville, that is the end of the Governmental Relations Committee meeting.
Thank you, Trustee Fagan. We will take a short, about, call it 7-minute recess, and we will convene the Board of Trustees at 9:35.
This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your